It's a very warm welcome to all of us who are joining us from all over the world. For some of us, it's a good morning, and some of us are hitting midday, and it could be evening for wherever you are. We are here at the Love Bay Broadcasting, and we are looking at the Africa Today show. And I know that this is something that many of you have been following so religiously over the years. And as you know, that here at Love Bay, we are always talking about those issues that touch the core of development of growth, because we believe that we are definitely better than where we are today, and we should be having the right conversations. So if you're joining us today, I will be your host. Cynthia Chirinda is my name, and the topic that we have today is Feeding Africa by Africans. We have some panelists who are joining us today. We have Dr. Francis Pindu Munangi, who's with us, joining us all the way from Timmins in Canada. Dr. Francis, you're welcome to this episode of Today's Africa. How is Canada today?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, host, Miss Jirinda. I'm delighted to be here. Love Bay has become a very, very special uh, event process happening in my life. And I look forward to these because it really gives us an opportunity to talk, to dialogue on matters that affect us as Africans. And of course, we also understand we have some people of African descent, and we also have other people who are not of African descent who are also part of our listenership. And so, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to our dialogue today.
Thank you so much for coming on board. And we are expecting other panelists to join us. And to our producer, Sir Theo, hats off to you and the teams behind the scenes there. You're always making it possible for us to bring this broadcast to our listeners who are always tuned in and ready to hear what it is that we are talking about on this particular broadcast. Sir Theo, just a few words to welcome all of our listeners and viewers today as we stream live on Facebook, on YouTube, and other platforms. Just a quick welcome note before we introduce our topic for the day.
Thank you, Sister Cynthia. It's a pleasure. It's a labor of love, and we love Africa. That's why we spend our time, at least for 24 hours, if we are able to spend about, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes to speak about the one we love. That's Mother Africa. It's great, and it's a labor of love, and we hope this is the first time, as a matter of fact, that we are doing this live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube, and on live radio too. So, I mean, it's fun, but all that I would say is that we apologize to the listeners and the viewers that, due to some technical, inconsistencies, as we should expect. And that's why we are a little bit late, but the topic will be discussed no matter what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Theo. And as he says, it's a labor of love. That's why it is called Love Bay. Afrobeat music and broadcasting to Africa and the Caribbeans and beyond, as Dr. Francis Mpindo has rightfully said there. Now, the topic that we have on discussion today, as we're talking about Africa, feeding Africa by Africans. One of the first things that came to my mind was, are we looking at food security issues? Are we looking at the tragedies that are surrounding over-dependence on international food aid? What are we looking at? So I was just talking to the producer and I say, what's on your heart? What do you see? And one of the things that he said to me is, we believe that Africans should and must not depend on outsiders to feed us, whereas we have what it takes. So the question is, do we believe that we have what it takes? So it's not only agriculturally, but in so many other aspects, we have enough and more than enough to produce for us. So we have a special guest that we are expecting to be joining us in the studio. And he is a guest who has done a lot of illustrious work in terms of just being able to single-handedly revamp the Nigerian rice industry to the point where
Hello?
we don't even import rice anymore. So welcome you,
My battery's
sir.
down.
Sir Abraham Juma.
Yeah, I'm
You
coming
are
on board.
live on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. I am your host, Cynthia Chirinda, and you are joined with other panelists. Dr. Francis Mpindu is joining us from Canada. I am currently hosting you here, and I am in Wisconsin in the USA. Tell us a little bit more about where you are and what is happening today, Sir Abraham Juma, before we get into the meat of the matter and talk about the illustrious work that you are doing. How are you today, sir? Can you hear us, Dr. Abraham? All right, he is still making his way. You're right, he's still making his way. But whilst he does that, let me just go ahead and just share a few facts for some of us who may not have heard about the guest that we have on this broadcast today. I will just share some of his illustrious career in as far as some of the political portfolio he has carried. Firstly, he was in the selected as a candidate
Hello?
in the UNC parliamentary elections in 1979. He was also an assembly member of Twifo Ayase. In 1998, he was the district chief executive of Twifo Hemang Lower Deng Kiria in 2001, from 2001 to 2004. The
What
deputy
more?
minister
What
of
can
local
we do again?
government from 2005 to 2007. Also Deputy Minister of Health from 2007 to 2009, and a Member of Parliament in Twifo Atim Mokwa constituency from 2017 to 2021. And this is just his political profile that I have shared with you here. Let me just check with him if he is settled in yet. All right. He is still settling in. So I'll go on to just share a little bit more about some of his key highlights in his career experience, being principal accountant of the cocoa processing company, being general manager in Drupo Wood Treatment Limited, agriculture consultant in J.A. Kufo Foundation, member and certified coach of the International Leadership Foundation, and also policy advisor of the Competitive Africa Rice Initiative, known as CARI. So as we wait for our special guest, Honorable Abraham Juma Odum, to settle, I will come to you, Dr. Francis Mpindu. I know you've done a lot of work across African nations. I know you have been working not only in the academia, but also you have been working with police and communities, and you have been working in some form or fashion with leaders. Let me know your thoughts, as far as this concept of Africans feeding Africa. Is this something that, why does this become a topic? It would sound or seem like it should be just obvious that a continent or a people should be able to feed themselves. But what comes to your mind when we start talking about the need for Africans to feed Africa?
Oh, thank you, Ms. Chirinda. I guess, given the fact that we're talking about this, it highlights that things are not what they should be. So that's why we have this dialogue. One of the things that comes to mind here, and I know I'm sort of preempting some things here. There are some policies that have been put in place by
Hello?
outside.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Francis.
Yeah, there are some policies that have been put in place by people outside of Africa that seem to work against us. So as a result, the efforts to feed ourselves have not gained as much traction and have helped ourselves and the world the way we would want to. Most of this stuff, I'm sure you might be aware of this, and some of our listeners might be aware of this, that there are policies that have been put in place to ensure that what we grow in Africa does not stay in Africa, but it actually goes outside, because there are people who are benefiting from it. And as a result, we end up depending on other people to feed us. So when you see tons and tons of food coming from outside of Africa to feed us, and yet we have this vast land that has been given to us, and we have access to it over the years, and yet we realize we have not had the access that we really want in order to make use of this land. That's why some people came, settlers came to take that land away from us. And some of our nations, including, I'll speak for myself here, including Zimbabwe, which is a fairly new nation, only been independent since 1980, we're still reeling with what does it mean to have land to ourselves. So when you have people like Professor Rukuni, who helps us to actually say, let's make use of our land. And yet we have our young people who are moving away from the land because they value being in the city. And you, Miss Chirinda, you are aware of this when it comes to rural and urban development. The rural is there to sustain us. That's life. But because of colonization, we now value the lights and the blings and the flash, the bling blings of the city. And we're forgetting that we should have our life intertwined with what's happening in the land. As you have already pointed out, I'm currently working with First Nations, a group of First Nations here in Canada. And these are the issues we're wrestling with. Yes, we want self-government. Yes, we want use of the land. But if we don't have the land itself, and if we don't own it, how can we even benefit from it? So all this to say, Ms. Chirinda, your topic for today is an exciting one, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from our brother, Honorable Odum, to help us process some of these things, because him having worked and living in Africa, I mean, he has a lot of access to information and things that I'm sure we will be able to benefit from today. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much. And indeed, it is a sad paradox that we should even be tabling this for discussion, considering that Africa as a continent boasts vast, vast arable land. Talk about wildlife. We've got the highest equatorial mountains, tropical rainforests in the world. And yet, despite possessing some of the world's driest deserts, we have what it takes. So there are indeed several factors that have been identified, as constraints to food production in Africa. There's a lot of talk around land degradation, mismanagement of available water resources, pest diseases, inappropriate food production and storage practices, inadequate food processing technologies. And in some parts of Africa, we look at things like civil conflicts and wars, poor economic policies to support food production, and as well as the low economic and social status of women, who even in the previous programs, we were bemoaning that they constitute the majority of food producers. So these, among so many other factors, have resulted in the steadily declining food security. But this is not the only narrative, and we really want to demystify, debunk, and talk a whole lot more around this. Now, Honorable Abraham Juma, thank you so much for joining us today. We have already shared some of your illustrious profile with our listeners. Honorable Abraham Juma Odum, you have done a lot of work, and I've had the opportunity to listen to some of your interviews, even on YouTube, when you were talking about just what it is that Africa needs in terms of having positive minds to succeed. And this, I think, has been quite a lot of your messaging, and you keep on talking about the need to be transformative, that we have to challenge the status quo. And these are some of the things that you have been speaking about. Now, I will not preempt you, Honorable. You are here. Our listeners, our guests, our viewers who are joining us on Facebook, they want to hear from the horse's mouth. Maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself and what got you to be engaging and doing what you are doing today. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think initially I was having some technical challenges. I'm sorry coming in late. But before I talk a little bit about myself, let me know the topic so that I can situate myself in the context of it.
Thank you very much. So today we were primarily focusing on Africans feeding Africa, because we are saying that, yes, we do have the capacity to be feeding ourselves. And we know that through CIRA and other programs, as a policy advisor in that capacity, you have been able to address some of those things. So we want to hear more from you in terms of feeding Africa by Africans.
Okay. As I was growing as a child, I read a book in the primary school, and in that book, it was a Chinese leader who made a statement, that's Genghis Khan, to the effect that his greatest pressure in the world was to conquer his enemy and see women and children wailing. Then I said to myself, when I grow, my greatest pleasure will be to conquer hunger and poverty and see women and children happy. So that has been my motivation and my driving force. Therefore, when I got opportunity to be a political leader, I ask myself, why am I a leader? I think I'm a leader so that I can pursue the dream and something that I have said to myself that I will do in future. And therefore, I started working on agriculture. That was where I was able to initiate what in Ghana we call cocoa high tech. Ghana at that time had come down in cocoa production to about 250,000 metric tons. But through that process, we're able to rediscover our feet, upscale it to 350 to 540, and even at a point that when I was no more even in government, we're able to do 1 million tons. In other words, it was a project that we did without any donor support. It was internal, and it was basically reorganizing the farmers, rearranging them, making sure that they were getting the right practices done, so that at the end of the day, with a little bit fertilizer here and there, they were able to make it. So that is how I entered into agric. Of course, my key thing was get to the research institution, make sure that whatever research work they had done, that is Cocoa Research Institute, came from the shelves onto the ground. So here, the point I want to make is that there's a lot of research that have been done by our researchers, and yet they are all crying in the shelves to be used. So if I have to make the first statement, what I want to say is that with reference to if Africans want to feed ourselves, if we want to go and stop importation of all the foodstuffs that we are importing from outside, even including toothpick, then we definitely need our research or beef up our research institute. if we have to beef up our research institute, I'm looking at even privatizing our research. If, for instance, rice farmers are able to get some people to do research for them on the seed and the soil and water, that will help them improve their yield. I think it's worth it, because at the end of the day, we'll all agree in that in Africa, despite the CADIP, despite the Malabo Convention, no government is prepared to go beyond 11%. And hardly would you even get them getting to even 6 or 7% of their GDP or their budget devoted to agriculture. So we don't have to be behaving like ostriches anymore. And we need to seriously take agriculture as a business. And if we have to take agriculture as a business, like any other industry does, then it means the players in agriculture would have to begin to fend for themselves. Because I have been in government before. What I have come to realize that anything that is supplied by government don't have any sustainability. So the little that I want to say is that if we really want to go that way, then we have to tread this way, where we start from research upwards. Then at the end of the day, another thing, yes, we talk about arable land, but land is not all that we need. The soil, it will surprise you to hear the little research that I have done is indicating that a lot of the soils in Africa have been compromised. They've been exhausted after overuse of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. A lot of our soils are so weak that if even you put in fertilizer, you are not able to get the yields. In spite of all the protocols that you follow, you will not get the yields as it is. So that is also another area that you may have the land, but how useful is the land in terms of the soil's suitability? That is another area that we need to look at. Then we come to the human being, who is the farmer. Invariably, what I realized with the Nigeria case was that, yes, we do a lot of advocacy for farmers to get funding, donor or government, yet we don't pay attention to the fact that is the farmer himself ready to accept and adapt the so-called technologies that we are bringing to them. And what I came out was that it was tackling that most of the farmers were not ready for it. And therefore, there's a need for a mindset shifting. And that is why in Nigeria, when we're doing the Competitive African Rights Initiative, I came out with 2 programs, which I dubbed the reorganization of the value chain players and then reorientation. And that is exactly what the secret for us, because at the end of the day, you need value FBOs that are well organized, well situated to take advantage of every technology or any funding that comes around. Most of the banks are looking for organizations that are well organized with good leadership. And that is even enough for collateral for them. But then in Africa, we don't have them. We have what we call the political organizations. And I think it's about time that if we want to feed ourselves, we have to shun that kind of political farmers, where people come in, government come in because of its wanting to serve its operatives. Some people come together, form organizations, farmer-based organizations, go for facilities, and then of course, nothing happens. That will not help Africa to produce food for itself. We need to shun from that uh, maintenance, so that we'll be able to get what we call Africa streaming up to become getting agriculture as a business rather than doing this kind of politics with it. After all, most of the time, we have our government promising our farmers fertilizer, promising them pesticides, promising them all these things. And we know for a fact that most of the time, those things don't get to the right farmers. And at the end of the day, most of the budget will have been used for these things, and yet we don't get the results coming out. So if Africa wants to feed itself, then we have to say goodbye to all this kind of approaches. We need to really situate agri as a business, and therefore government will only have to set up enabling environment. Once the enabling environment is set up, and then the people in it are well oriented, then of course, making good choices and decisions, then we are hopeful that Africa can make it and produce its own food. Because come to think of, we even importing toothpick, where in Africa we have a lot of bamboo that can be converted into toothpick. And yet, for instance, where I come from, we are spending close to about $20 million importing toothpick. This is something very unacceptable. So maybe by way of introduction, this is what I want to say. And I don't know what colleagues also have to say in support of what I'm saying, or to maybe even debunk what I'm saying. But I rest my case and then listen to other colleagues as well.
Honorable Abram Juma Odum, those are very, very powerful words. And I think just hearing you talking about the passion that drove you into this space, that this is not just something that you were twiddling your fingers and thinking, well, I wonder what I should do to have significance and a voice. But just hearing that from a very young age, you had within you this desire to conquer hunger and poverty. And here we are looking at you decades later, playing this pivotal role, not only as a policy advisor, but definitely as a thought leader in this space. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And one of the main things that I hear resonating from what you've just shared with us is the fact that we need sustainability, because we can come up with solutions, but how sustainable are they? And you are definitely making an emphasis there for the need for us to look at agriculture as a business and not politicize all of this. And as you have rightfully also said, that the over-reliance that we have had on African governments to say the government must apportion so much in terms of the budget so that we can have these outcomes. And you are saying, look, this is the approach that we've been having. We've had this expectation. It is supposed to be working, but it's not working. So let's move on. And this is what I'm hearing you provoking us to say, let us not continue resting on our laurels and expecting the government to do things, but let us begin to think about how we can privatize some of these things. And let us begin to look at how we can actually move research from the shelf and actually put some legs into it. How are we investing into our research so that we are beefing it and it's becoming meaningful? And of course, you definitely talk about the person behind all of this, and this is the farmer. Is the farmer willing and ready to adapt to technology? Because we are living in a time where, for example, the other time I was just watching what the Israeli president was showcasing in terms of some of their agricultural productions and innovations. And I thought, wow, this is really quite interesting. And when you do have a moment, I would love for you to just weigh in on some of what Israel is doing and maybe what lessons can be learned and what it is that we can do as Africans to begin to just take a leaf from some of that. And of course, you are talking about reorganizing and reorienting the value chain players. That's definitely a mouthful there. And I know that our listeners and our viewers are listening. And if you are just joining us, welcome to Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. You're joining us on this show. Today is Africa, where today our topic is Feeding Africa by Africans. Sir JB, John Daniels, you're joining us here. And we have had just a very interesting, powerful presentation there by Honorable Abraham Juma. Any words you want to share with us, John Daniels? Maybe tell our listeners who are seeing you today for the first time
Cynthia.
where you're joining us from. Over to you, Sir John Daniels.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, for having me. I would rather do some initial comments and maybe follow up with questions to Mr. Honorable Odum. I think Dr. Mpinu and Honorable Odum have done a human job to the topic. But I realized from the discussion of Mr. Odum, we have to take agriculture as a business. Now, most of the African countries, because of the loans they take from these international institutions, who give them the various conditionalities, it makes it difficult for them to put a chunk of the national budget to support agriculture. But strangely enough, these governments who do not take a big chunk of their budget to support agriculture, indigenous agriculture, rather import most of the basic things that we need with the same money that they are crying over, or that they have been advised not to give it to the farmers because it will go waste. I don't think it will go waste. In Africa, if you look at the GDP of totality of Africa, the bulk of our GDP is derived from agriculture. Because definitely African countries are not so much industrialized. So we don't produce much of the industrial goods. But after agriculture, like Honorable Odum said, we've got the land, we've got the men. And what is left to us is that we should realize that agriculture should be taken as a business. Well, definitely there should be governmental support. But when you look at the big enterprises that engage in agriculture, the banks are ready to deal with them. But you will notice that the bulk of the farmers in Africa are the peasant farmers. Those who don't have any collateral by way of buildings and what have you. So the banks will not look at them. But they are the bulk of the farmers that we have in Africa. And that's where the government will have to come in by way of reorientating them, as Honorable said, get them into cooperatives. But definitely if they have got cooperatives, they have got good structures with the head, financier for the cooperative, bank accounts, where accountant is appointed and the good accounts are taken. When you send a proposal to the banks will look at it more. Otherwise, the African banks are interested in those who do buy and sell, those who import goods, finished goods, and come and sell in our countries. Because if you look at the amount of protein that we need by way of meat and chicken that we import, it will blow your mind. If you look at the amount of canned things, in Ghana, we import fresh tomatoes from Burkina Faso. We import canned tomato from Spain and Italy, as well as Brazil and now China. But Ghana has got one of the fertile lands in Africa. Stretching to other African countries, we notice that our government have not put in the needed impetus, and they have not realized that we have serious advantage over all the things that we have here. And our Greek is number one advantage that we have. With little effort, with little planning, with little research into the way we do our agriculture, we will succeed. But that's not what we are doing. But Mr. Odum, Honorable Odum,
Yes,
I want to ask this question.
I'm here. Right.
What is it about the Nigeria experience that we were able to have those good yields? That we see tons of bags of harvested rice at their yards. Because when we were young, Nigeria was a good agriculture country. I remember I think they were the leading exporter of granules. They have made a lot of pyramids of granules, but when they screwed the oil, then the agriculture came down.
Yeah.
Ghana, when we started dealing with the IMF, because of their conditionalities that government should not give utilities to farmers, the agriculture came down. So even though we are saying we are going to take agriculture as a business, there's no way we can leave up the government. Honorable Odum, what was the magic about the Nigeria experience?
No, you
All right,
see,
before I give over to Honorable to just answer that question, and that's a very important question that you've just said there. You've just put on the spotlight, because if we are hearing you, you are really bemoaning the fact that, yes, we need to privatize, but what do we do when the bulk of our farmers are peasant farmers? We still need government coming in to provide some way of coordinating their efforts and to be able to give them their muscle there. And of course, you would like to hear from Honorable in terms of his learned experiences in Nigeria, how some of that can be applied. But before you respond to that, Honorable Abraham, I would like to just come to Dr. Francis Mpindo. I know you've been listening also to what Honorable has said. I just wanted to hear what you would also like to weigh in before he responds, and then we go to the second round of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chirinda. The information that was shared by Honorable Odum is the kind of information, from what I normally say, it makes me angry in a good way, because the information you're sharing really causes us in some of the things that I am processing. I know that my wife keeps saying, don't keep talking about writing a book. Let's see the book. I'm writing a book on decolonization processes. So in this book, I am looking at institutions to see how these institutions were functioning before independence. And after independence, we thought they would just continue to function, but we were not analytical enough to understand how they were functioning. So we thought if we just grow maize, then we're going to be sustainable. But there were some factors that were influencing the way they were running these institutions. The same thing with police, the same thing with our education, the same thing with our health. There were underlying realities that we did not process. So when you talk about how the soil has been compromised, many of us, we don't even think along those lines. It was like, oh, wow, Honorable Odum is right on here. Our soil has been compromised. The kinds of fertilizers, we actually thought that as long as you're fertilizer, you're going to have a good crop. But we were not thinking beyond. We were not thinking we need to give this land rest so that we use the other land. But did we have that kind of land to play around with? No, because somebody had taken that land from us. I mean, I know that, that's something we could talk about, but the kinds of things you have highlighted, Honorable Odum, they really focus on the need for us to have a new dialogue, to discover things that will help us, what the next steps. For example, when you focused a little bit on research, I said, yeah, because you know what? If we focus on research, on privatizing some of these, as Ms. Chirinda has already pointed out, and in support of your initial idea, and I agree with you totally, it's going to enhance creativity among our young people. We have tons and tons of young people in our universities, but many of them now, they are taking, Chinese language in university, which has nothing to do with developing our own countries, our own nations. We think it's It's classy to go into a Chinese restaurant and eat with chopsticks. Nothing wrong about Chinese food. I love it too. But listen, we need to focus on developing ourselves. So if we talk about privatization as far as research is concerned, not only are we enhancing creativity, but we are also bringing a sense of competition. We want, because when you have competition, then people are going to be motivated. But right now, if you have this quasi type of approach where we are like, okay, we depend on the government, and then as Ms. Chirinda pointed out, everything is so politicized. There are people who actually bring maize, corn, to give to our people so that they get votes, because things are being compromised. I was listening the other day, not too long ago. They were talking about South Africa imported $5 million worth of maize, and I'm like, come on, we have African countries that have tons and tons of maize, but because things are politicized, the farmers, as you have pointed, Honorable Odum, they're getting paid peanuts for what they produce. So they get discouraged. So instead of producing maize, they're going to produce tobacco. They're going to produce things that they can export and get more money. Why can't we put focus on what is happening so that we benefit from it? So again, you're saying things that really annoy me in a good way, but thank you for bringing those. And so, Ms. Chirinda, back to you.
Thank you very much. Now back to you, Honorable Abraham Juma Odum. These intimations that have been shared by Sir John Daniels, and again, he is bemoaning the same fact that Dr. Francis has just mentioned here about the fact that our governments are working on laws that they have been adopted from international institutions. And Dr. Francis is saying these have been inherited, from colonial institutions as well. So but governments are failing to come up with budgets that support agriculture. That's what Sir John Daniels was bemoaning. Please do go ahead and respond to some of those questions, especially in relation to your Nigerian experience as well.
Okay, I'm happy I've been able to make a positive provocation. Doc, I'm sure you are going to respond to the provocation. You have to. And I'm happy you are writing a book. Maybe we'll share contacts, and then the little stuff that I have to give you, I can give you to enhance your book that you're writing, okay? But in Nigeria, what I realized was that we need the private people to come together. Who is government? Government is us. But we let the people that we vote for become our lords, and they rather dictate to us. It's unacceptable. Just let's look at the case of Sri Lanka, and then even Netherlands, the farmers. I think it's about time that we say enough is enough. Because at the end of the day, let us look at COVID. When it came, and that no plane was moving, no ship was moving. And if we were to get our food, our staple food from outside, what were we going to do? So it's about time that some of us are saying that enough is enough. After all, the 30 people or 70 or 100 people in government or in cabinet, what have you, you don't own us. We rather put you there. And this is the way we want you to go. When we started Nigeria, I started organizing the rice farmers, the millers, the input dealers. Little did, the government know we're coming in that big bank. Of course, we're using the FMAT people. They were coming, they were attending the meetings. Central Bank was attending our meetings. The police, customs, everybody was attending. But I spent most of the time with the stakeholders. I had to go to the rural areas the local government areas, organize them, and bring them to the state level. And as I was organizing them, eating with them, sometimes I had to even use Okada, motorbike, to get to them, to tell them that it's about time that we do something unusual, that we will get unusual results. Once we did it and we started coming up, of course, the technical team was also working on productivity. It was all about productivity. It was all about availability. It was all about quality. It was all about price. Once those things were addressed, and then we became very competitive, then of course, government will have no option but to listen to us. So I think for us to be able to force or agree with our government to do what we want them to do, because at the end of the day, if we are sending 9 billion to outside for them to produce for us, what it means is that $9 billion could have stayed here. And I hear in Africa currently, we are spending in the billions of dollars in importing foodstuffs, which means those money that we are sending outside could have been money that we would have distributed among our youth. And because they are not getting it, that is why we are having the ritual murders. That is why we are having the yahoos, yahoo boys. So the question is, are we going to still allow those monies to go outside? And then at the end of the day, we face the social consequence of all the malams that we have in our society. So I think civil society will have to back up. Civil society, some of us will have to lay our lives for that. And I have said, I'm 71 years now. I've said that the rest of my life, I want to dedicate it to fighting this fight so that the youth will be taken care of. Because I don't know what will happen to my grandchildren, my children and my great-grandchildren in future if the Chinese people to come and take over our land. And that here in Africa, the Chinese have taken over, some of them have started taking lands in large quantities. At the end of the day, people who are on their own land will have to work for people who have come to take their land. So I think that civil society will have to rise up to this call of making agric a business, that we do it gradually, and we have to force governments into it. If we are able to show that we are ready for it, then they will have no alternative but to succumb to it. Daniels, you remember, when I was a chief executive at Chufupraso, and I started Cocoa High Tech, President Kufuor sent a team from Castle and then Cocoa Board of all institutions, to come to me, a chief executive in our village, to know how I did it. And of course, I explained to them how I did it with the farmers. I did it with the farmers, I did it with my agri team, I did it with my assembly members, and it worked. So definitely, President Kufuor team came, and they had no other option but to say that, Mr. President, what Odum has done in that rural community is worth replicating over the country. And that is what we have the Cocoa High Tech. So I think it's about time that some of us become so radical in the things that we do with our farmers. Because for me, I was a farmer son, and I'm still a farmer's son. I learned it from the scratch. And that is where sometimes I talk about this child labor thing, and I'm so passionate that you go to the Western world, they teach their children how to tan, they teach them on their own career. But then when it comes to us, they say, hey, if you send your child to the farm, it's child labor. What the hell are we talking about? Me, I learned it. I learned cocoa, I learned rice farming from my father. At the same time, I was schooling. Daniels was my classmate in sixth form, and we're all good, and we have come to this level. It wasn't, if it wasn't for the agric that I did those days, I've not done agric officially in class before. But then the agric that I did with my father is what has motivated him and has sent me that, giving me that passion to work for cocoa farmers and then rice farmers. So I think that civil society will have to rise up, and then government will have to no alternative but to respond positively to that.
Wow. Those are passionate words. And we know why. This is a farmer's son, and he is a son of the soil, and he is definitely embedded in making sure that there is transformative action so that we have transgenerational impact. Now, just listening to you, and one of the most fervent statements that you have been recorded to be saying, Honorable, was that we should not just identify people who have the passion, perseverance, commitment, and selflessness to pursue these things. We want to be able to just engage and begin to say, how do we convert this passion,
Exactly,
perseverance, and commitment, and actually begin to do things that can take care of Africa's future generation? Now, we definitely hear you speaking there with passion about young people. And if you're just joining us here, we are on this powerful show, Today's Africa, which is hosted by Love Bay, Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And today's topic, we are looking at Feeding Africa by Africans. And we have with us Honorable Odum, who is touted as the Ghanaian Ghanaian policy advisor behind the Nigerian rice production boom. And he has been emphasizing that for us to be able to transform the agriculture sector, we would require greater commitment on the side of policy implementers to succeed. And he's just telling us now that the role of civil society, because Sir JB there had just highlighted the fact that, you know, government is letting us down. Government needs to pull up their socks so that we can have a coordinated effort, especially with the peasant farmers. And we hear in response, Honorable, you were saying that, yes, they do need, they have a role to play as government, but civil society even has a more provocative role to play. Now, I would like to pose this question to you. I have been working in civil society, especially in Zimbabwe, and as you may be aware, it is one of those spaces which are being silenced by the government, to the point where, as we speak right now, there was a policy enacted that there should no more be registration allowed for more some of these organizations that can then in turn become civil society. So we are seeing a kind of muting of these voices. So yes, you are encouraging civil society to take on this role where they are bringing government to book and to be that voice that reminds government of their role. What do we do given this reality that civil society is being muted by certain governments in Africa? That's just a quick question coming from me there.
Let's imagine if our farmers were to say they are going on strike for 1 week, and that nobody was going to farm to bring any foodstuff. Do you think our government can stand it? The power is there.
Revolution.
Yes, the power is there. Except that, you see, it's a mindset. That is why I always emphasize on the mindset. As I am now, I'm so free in my mind. Anything that I say, I don't have any fears. In as much as I'm not breaching any law, I think I can say it and say it emphatically. Let us get civil society as you are doing. Wean yourself from fundings that will string you. If you wean yourself from fundings that will string you, if you wean yourself from political connections, I tell you, you can be more effective. But here in Africa, I keep on saying it, most of the time, you see civil society and they are dependent on some fundings that will not allow them to go the extra mile because the power is with us. But then, because of these compromises here and there, we are not able to do anything. Where I am now, I'm not interested in positions. What I'm interested is the dream and my vision that I will conquer hunger and poverty and see women and children happy. So I'm driven by that passion. That alone, if I die with it, I die. May I ask permission? I have a meeting with some farmers at 6 o'clock. And where I am, I have to travel about 30 minutes to get them. So that if I don't go, I'll be disappointing them. Rice Farmers Association have invited me for a meeting in the Accra, around the Sprinters Road. And I have to go by now as I cannot make their time. So maybe with all due respect, let me say I want to get out of the radio room.
We have been so honored to have you in this studio, and I think that alone shows and tells to our viewers and listeners that you are a man of your word. When you talk about, I am passionate about this, and there you are getting busy and getting your hands dirty and working with the very constituents that we are talking about, who are the key factor and drivers behind this. And we want to thank you so much for your time on behalf of our producers, because some of your parting shots, they have spoken volumes, because you said the question is, what is actually driving the agenda? Because if they are civil society and they are driven by another external agenda, which is funding them, can we actually say that this is a pure agenda? And we can see, sir, you are not just an honorable member. You are not just a policy advisor. You are not just a farmer's son, but you are a farmer at heart yourself. So please be released on behalf of the producer. We would wish you well, would like to wish you well. And please do pass our warm regards and strengthen those farmers that you're going to meet, and let them know that we are 100% behind all the efforts that they're engaged in. So we would like to release you, sir. Any parting shots from anyone before we release Honorable Abraham?
Only that, Doc, I would like to hear from you, Doc, and your book. So you can take my contact and let's get in touch.
I will get your contacts through our brother Theo. And again, sir, thank you so much for making time to be with us. As Miss Chirinda pointed out, you are a practitioner. You're putting your mouth into your pocket, into your heart, and into your head. So keep up the good work, sir. We will be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will tell the team that I'm meeting that we had this wonderful discussion.
Thank you. We have been honored to have you here. And sir, you are released. Please do go and do the needful. Thank you very much. And we would like to
thank you. Daniels, let's talk. Let's get in touch, okay? Daniels.
I will do that.
Okay. Right. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah,
right.
I will do that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So to all of our listeners, our live stream channels are open. If you are joining us on Facebook, please do hit the chat and let us know some of your thoughts on some of the issues that our special guest here, Mr. Honorable Odum, has been sharing with us. And one of the key things that he talks about is the fact that the agricultural sector requires positive minds to be able to succeed. And he has said in many of his speeches before that, to a large extent, the failure that we have to feed ourselves is attributed to the lack of pragmatic policies, the large importation of large quantities of the commodity by influential people in government and their cronies to compete with the local produce, amongst others. Now, these are things that he has been saying, and this is great food for thought. Theo, you are our producer, but I know this is something that you are very passionate about. Anything that you would like to just say in response to what our guests had to say today?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I'm in agreement. I'm in a total agreement with what he had to say, because we've been saying, or we've been discussing on this program about how we have been mismanaged by people that we trust and vote for them. Sometimes it gets to a point where I feel that even, why do we even bother to vote? Because whenever they go there, they forget about what needs to be done. We've been talking also about leadership. There seems to be a leadership crisis in Africa, and it's been there. Before the forefathers, the Nkrumahs and the Nyereres and all these, they knew exactly what they were doing. Agricultural policies were right there. If you take, I will speak about Ghana, for instance. Dr. Nkrumah was able to organize the Farmers' Council. The Farmers' Council. And everything that the farmers needed had to go through the Farmers' Council. And then they were implemented. He never said no, because he believed in his Africanness, if I can put it that way. And in today's Africa, as we can put it, it's a shame for us even to come here to be speaking to the whole world about the fact that even toothpick has got to be imported onto the continent. We have, I'll go back to Dr. Nkrumah's time again. He was so astute, he was so smart, he was so brilliant, God bless his soul, wherever he is, that he had to even set up the Soil Research College, or Institute, I beg your pardon, where they mapped out every part of Ghana. I quite remember when I was in high school, we took excursions to all these areas there. And we went to the Soil Research Institute, and they had mapped out every corner of Ghana where you can plant anything. And not that he didn't do what he did. He made sure that if wheat was to be planted there, he'll give all the necessary help. Because you know what? What he did was that the Minister of Agriculture wasn't, a doctor in agricultural science and all those. No. He relied on the farmers themselves. That's why they called him, his followers were called the veranda boys. He did not go out and appoint people who did not have what it takes to head ministries. We've discussed this before. So if he comes out to say that civil societies will have to wake up, I'm in total agreement with him. Because I cannot see the continent importing grain to the tune of $9 billion in 2019 onto the continent. $9 billion grain imports from Ukraine and Russia. It's a disgrace, it's a shame. So the youth of Africa should right now sit up and say that enough is enough. Because if at the top, like they say, that if you kill a snake and you cut the head, all the rest that is left there is a belt or a rope. So we have to be able to stand up and say that enough is enough, just like he said. And throughout the efforts of so many countries and so many countries coming to Africa, bribing their way through to buy lands, and then making us go serve them somewhere down the line. It's a shame. So Africa, the time has come for Africans to feed themselves. But there shouldn't be any excuse. if you put, I quite remember to copy. I was in the Caribbean, and when you go to most of these Caribbean countries, for instance, I was in St. Vincent in the Grenadines. If you put anything there, it goes up. And every city dweller has something there. They know how to farm. They know everything. I was so astonished. It's not a matter of who knows what and who doesn't know anything. We had a government that came into power that called Operation Feed Yourself under General Champo's regime. Operation Feed Yourself. When he launched that program, trust me, fishermen were able to go and fish. There was the overabundance of fish. There was the overabundance of everything that we had to, we did not import anything. So what changed? That's my question. What changed? Or what has changed? What are some of the new breed of politicians we have? Now it has become me, myself, and my family, me, myself, and my friends. They don't even think about the people. So I'm in a total agreement with Honorable Odum for civil societies to wake up. Other than that, we are losing our continent. Thank you, Sister Cheringa. Since you are muted.
Thank you very much there, Theo. And I'm hearing you talking about just the need for us to go back to who we are known as Africans, which is a collective community of people who are not individualistic thinkers, just thinking about their own stomachs, but being able to say, how do we lead ourselves? And I can also hear you bemoaning the quality of our leadership, because you're saying, what has changed? What has changed that has moved us from thinking about the broader community, about thinking about the next person? Is it because we have become greedy and we have lost a sense of what true government is? And when we talk about true government, we are saying you have an opportunity of leading and bringing people together toward common good, so that you are delivering political goods for the people, for everyone to enjoy. So thank you so much for posing those questions. We have come to that part of the program. To all of our viewers and listeners who are joining us today on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, where we are wrapping up the show. And today we have been talking about Feeding Africa by Africans on today's Africa show. Your parting shots, Sir John Daniels, in a minute.
Yeah, Cynthia, you notice that in Africa, most of our farmers are the aged, the old people who don't have the strength to do, because they do subsistence farming with the colors and hope, and they are old, they can't do much now. But during the time of the COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war, we noticed that because the African countries could not import goods from outside, but the ships were not running, cost of imported items became prohibitive. But what was even strange was the fact that the food that we produce in Ghana, the foodstuff that we produce in Ghana, the plantain, cassava, and what have you, and maize that we produce in Ghana, was so cheap in the hinterland. But when it came to the city centers or the regional centers, they were so expensive. And when you dive into it, you notice that our governments have not been developing the hinterlands. Because for you to do a successful agriculture or farming, there should be an access road to the farm gate, so that the food produced can be catered to the centers. But here you have not built the roads. You have not built the roads that the drivers, those who own the transport owners, will go and bring the food. They go to these farm gates and ply on these roads, pothole roads. When it rains, the car have to swim in a pothole before you come. So, and of course, you notice that after the coming into force of the Russia-Ukraine war, petrol, fuel, gas, gasoline prices went up. So they use that as an excuse. But if our government have realized that we needed to put in the infrastructure in all the regions of Ghana and even feed the roads to the villages and towns, where the food planted and harvested will not go bad, but it can be catered to the centers or to the factories. You will get somewhere. Look at a young man who has gone to school and he has gone to a boarding school in the city center or the town or in the region. Then after school, you want him to go back to the village, go and live in the mud house or the thatch house. How do you, with the toilets, how do you expect the same person to go back to his village, beyond the parents? That's why most of the farmers are aged, but their children have gone to the town centers to look for the non-existent white-collar jobs. So it's a whole gamut of reasons that we have to see to and perfect. Otherwise, we are not going where by way of agriculture. Thank you, Cynthia.
That's powerful. And what you are saying, there is definitely the need for holistic solutions, because agriculture cannot survive in any nation without the right infrastructural support. And especially when we're looking at an aging population being primarily involved in agriculture, how do you create an enabling environment that will also make the young people want to be involved? Those are very powerful inputs right there. Dr. Francis Mnangimpindo, in a minute as we wrap up, what are your parting shots?
Having listened to inputs from the panelists, including our special guest, there are a number of words that stand out for me. One of them has already been intimated by our brother JD, and you have already mentioned that as well, that there's need for partnerships, the young and the old. We need each other. And as a result, I think if we create opportunities for our young people who are very creative, who are very much into technology, they will do the research for us. So let's invest in them, create opportunities for our youth to be creative. If we're talking about looking into our soil to see what has happened, our young people are able to come up with skills to help us look into the soil. So partnerships is very important, and obviously the research focus. The other thing that comes to mind is participation of the people who really need to be engaged in the farming industry or the farming business. And obviously, innovation comes to mind and implementation, because we can't just toy in the idea of nice ideas, but we're not putting them into practice. So these are some of the things that comes to mind. I mean, some of the things that come to mind as we wrap up today. But thank you so much, Ms. Chirinda, for guiding us today.
Thank you so much for that input. Definitely, we need that intergenerational transfer of skills and wealth of wisdom, because the young people are also coming in not only with their energy, but they have exposure to innovations and technology and ideas that the older generation may not have. But then, of course, the experience that the older generation have can never be exchanged for anything. So let us continue having that intergenerational transfer of skills and wealth of knowledge. Now, that brings us to a wrap on this edition of Africa Today, where we have been talking about feeding Africa by Africans. And you have been joining us on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. I have been your host today, Cynthia Chirinda. We look forward to welcoming back our usual host, Dr. Diallo, who usually hosts this program very well. We do miss you, Dr. Diallo, wherever you are. And we want to thank our producers behind the scenes, Theo and the team. So this is us signing out from Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Keep on developing Africa.